family being loud is all get out.
They having a party up there or what?
Nah, it ain't a party. You're just talking, man. That's standard operating procedure around here, bro. Yeah, nobody likes to use their quiet voice in my house, man. Yeah. For whatever reason, man, folks just like to be loud, man. Whatever reason, man. Yeah, man, threw down on some ribs yesterday, bro.
Nice. What dry rub do you use?
I actually used, for the first time I used Big Mo Casins.
Gotta try that Salt Lake dry rub, man.
Alright, I'm gonna check them out. Yeah, I'm gonna check them out.
Alright, let's do this.
Alright. Let's do this. Yes, sir.
It's time for another episode of Cap Casualties Podcast. Now here are two guys that were traded away from Houston long before it became fashionable. It's Patrick Lopez.
Here's the deal. I'm the best there is, plain and simple. I mean, I wake up in the morning, I piss excellence.
And Rod English.
I've got the style and profile like never before. Woo!
Greetings and salutations, everybody. We're back. It's another episode of the Cap Casualties Podcast. I'm Patrick Lopez. With me, as always, is my friend of nearly 3 decades, the notorious R.O.D., Rod English. Rod, what's going on, man? How you been these last few weeks, man?
Man, I've been good, man. I've been real good. I had a whole lot of stuff go down, man. Just life, man. I mean, all good stuff. Don't get me wrong, man. But just, a lot of life, man. But can't complain, man. Couldn't wait to, like I always say, get back on the mic and spit these flames.
Spit these flames. Lots happened in the last few weeks. We finally know who is in line to draft the next superstars in the NBA. We had a really weird event take place a couple weeks ago regarding an MLB writer making things seem interesting for a while, but also get a little weird regarding sign stealing and quote-unquote cheating in baseball, which we'll take these guys to task, trust me. Fans going nuts, including the Tour de France. And lastly, the NCAA does what it does best, and that's screw the student athlete. Rod, let's jump right into it. First things first here. NBA talk. Since last we talked, LeBron James, James Harden, Kevin Durant, superstars. Remember, man, the beginning of the year, when that trade went down for James Harden, sending him to Brooklyn, that was it, man. It was it's Brooklyn and the Lakers and everyone else. Ain't that way no more. No, sir.
Nope.
No, sir. And it was poetry watching what happened, and that was watching LeBron melt down. The last series, the last few games, walking out in game 5 or game 6? Which game was it? Was it game 5?
It was 5.
Walking out with 6 minutes to go and just said screw this, because that's what leaders do, guys. And then just the team melted down in game 6, and watching the Brooklyn Nets just fold as well was a sight to see, man. Injuries are. James Harden was suffering an injury. Kyrie Irving didn't play because of an injury. But the reality is that with pro sports, injuries are unforgiving, man. That's the nature of the beast. You push through it, you and I know this as fans of several Texas and Houston-based teams. There were a couple years back where the Rockets were a Chris Paul hamstring away from potentially beating the Warriors and going to the NBA Finals. In the early 2010s, the Texans were on a ride that could have seen a Super Bowl trip had it not been for a Matt Schaub, Liz Frank muscle that was in his foot. But these things aren't sour grapes for fans. This is the nature of the beast.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, you bring back some painful memories, man.
I hate to do that to you, man, but the one thing is when those things go down, what's the one thing we always hear? Yeah, injuries are a part of sports. That's it.
Yeah.
If you're going to be unforgiving if you're going to be unforgiving about every other team, do the same. Just be consistent. And you know me, Rod. Whether it's political talk, social talk, whatever you see on social media, the idiots out there posting their crap. When it comes to MLB and how they made the Astros sacrificial lambs to quote unquote sign stealing, cheating when they were, half the league was cheating. We all know this. My thing is, if you're going to have that hot take, be consistent. That's all I ask.
That's it.
Be consistent. And you know what? If you're going to talk your smack about other teams that didn't make it, that's fine. But you gotta represent when it comes time to talk about how LeBron and the Nets and Durant and Harden and the Nets didn't make it. And we're talking about potentially seeing Trae Young and the Hawks versus Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and the Suns. I mean, it may not go down that way. We still may get an LA team. I highly doubt it at this point, but it's just crazy to me, man, because I you know me, I like the chaos. I love the chaos in March Madness. I like the chaos in the playoffs of all sports, that whenever the underdog can squeak through, and not even the underdog, but the teams that aren't historically popular and predicted to go, the big market teams on the West Coast and East Coast, when they're pushed out the door and another team that normally historically doesn't get in there regularly, I'm all for that, man. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I would love to see the Bucks in the NBA Finals just as much as I'd love to see the Hawks. I really am pushing for the Suns because I am a fan of Chris Paul, and I'm hoping he pushes through. But I've been a big fan of Devin Booker's the last couple of years. A really big fan of his.
Man, I mean, look, Devin Booker. I forgot who I was telling this to, but you are seeing elements of Kobe in his game, and you can tell that he had been mentored by Kobe. Because if you look at, I haven't paid too much attention to, and for whatever reason, haven't paid too much attention to the Western Conference Finals other than Game 1.
Yeah.
And in Game 1, man, I mean, Devin Booker had that mid-range going strong, and I'm telling you, it was a beauty to see.
I'm happy, dude, with some of these younger guys coming in, bringing back the mid-range game. What Chris Paul made art with what Kobe made art, that mid-range shot. I'm so happy to see that, because for a while there, including the Rockets, we were seeing that whole shift towards threes or dunks, threes or post, threes or at the bucket, threes or at the bucket. That was it. And seeing that mid-range game, how it can just, if you're hot, you can just deconstruct a team, man. And that's what Booker did in that first game. And I'm really happy to see him and like I said, Chris Paul, because these are guys that historically aren't super dynamic guys that shoot lights out behind the arc, but they have great mid-range game, and it's good to see what's happening over there in Phoenix, man. And you lived in Arizona for a long time, so I'm sure you're happy to see this as well. Part of you.
Yeah, man. I mean, having lived in Arizona for a little bit, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that I became a Suns fan, but visiting and having spent some time in the city of Phoenix. Phoenix is a great city. Phoenix is a great city, and I would recommend anybody to go visit Phoenix, man, especially if you got a little bit of coin to burn. You got to go to Scottsdale. Scottsdale is the joint. You understand me? Scottsdale, Paradise Valley, all around that area on the east side of town. Man, that's where it's at right there, bro. I mean, if you want to just, have a good time, or if you just want to just go chill, Scottsdale is the joint. But Phoenix is such a dope city, and I'll be honest with you, I'll go on a limb. I'm pulling for Phoenix to win the whole thing, man. I mean, mainly because I'm Chris Paul. I can't wait for him to put a ring on finally, and of course. I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but I'm really hoping that does happen. If you ask me, I think that they are the favorite to win. right now to win the whole thing. I mean, of course, we still got a long way to go, and and also in Phoenix's last win, Chris Paul was getting interviewed, and the sideline reporter had mentioned, well, so what do you think about you going up 3-1? What were your thoughts on that? And Chris Paul was like, man, hey, shut all that talk up, man. I haven't had any good luck with 3-1. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not talking about that right now, and rightfully so.
We
so,
shutting that down. We shutting that down. That's what he did.
Right.
We're not going
so, so yeah, I mean, but the parity. But going back to your original point, as far as the chaos and the parity in the NBA, you gotta love it if you are a basketball fan. Number one, and number two, you gotta love it from the standpoint of we are seeing, and I want to say all four teams that are in the conference finals bring a style of basketball that will make the purist in anybody smile, because you got teams that, if you ask me, they're balanced. You know what I mean? They're not consistently just jacking up threes, jacking up threes, jacking up threes, jacking up threes,
Yep.
dunks. They have balance. You know what I mean? And so now, if they're hot beyond the 3-point range, the 3-point line, then it is what it is. But still, they bring balance to the game, and I'm loving what I'm seeing. I'm loving what I'm seeing.
Yep. No, I agree, and I'm not going to say I'm a purist, because when I think of purist, it's almost like a derogatory term for me now, because I think of MLB purist and how much they're a-holes, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But it's very. I like what I've liked what I've seen. I really was hoping that we would get the Suns in the NBA Finals. We're 3-1 tonight while we're recording. That could close out. They could be closing it out in the NBA Finals by the time we wrap this bad boy up tonight. Wishing them the best, man. And in regards to who's coming out of the East, I mean, I like what I've seen out of Trae Young and the Hawks. Clint Capella, former Rockets, on that squad. The Bucks have PJ Tucker over there, another former Rocket that's a fan favorite, and a UT alum. So man, it's been fun to watch what's been going down. I think probably for me though with the Bucks, I'm a little bit of a Chris Middleton fan, because I think he's flown under the radar for quite a while now. But he's a really good player, a really good athlete. But yeah, it's been fun to watch these playoffs, and I don't like to bask in the misery of like the loss for LeBron or Harden. Yeah. For me, it's just like, look, guys, it's easy for folks to talk a big mess, but hey, they got to eat their crow now, and I'm okay with that, because I've had in my lifetime I've had to eat a lot of crow when it came to sports talk, and so for me, I was very happy to see a changing of the guard, especially when it came to the LeBron era in the NBA Finals. We get to see some fresh blood in there from a different squad, and I'm happy for that. So it's been fun to watch. In terms of like what's been going down this week, you and I have been watching this for a while and waiting for it. We finally know where our team, the Houston Rockets, are going to pick in the NBA draft after tanking this, quote unquote, after tanking this season. We don't want to say that, guys. We don't really want to say that because the tanking doesn't work anymore. But you know what, man? I'm not going to lie. I was very nervous. Like, as the season went on, I kept saying lose, and people were like, what does it matter? The percentage doesn't matter. I'm like, it does matter to me. Like,
it does matter, man.
But everyone was like, The Rock, it doesn't matter what you think. To me, it was like, it does matter to me. I want them to suck so they can get a good pick, because it's been since Morey came into the league. I mean, not the league, but since he took over the GM duties of the Rockets, and they got a pick this high, right? I think it was Rudy Gay. Rudy Gay was like the last high pick that they shipped off at the beginning of Morey's era for Shane Battier, if I remember correctly. Okay, that was like a top 10, right? I think that was a top 10. Yeah. Okay,
it was.
So, but I was nervous because of the restrictions that could have taken place. They could have lost this had it fallen out of the top 4, and they had to ship it off to Oklahoma City. So the Rockets, and the probability of them having to lose and give that pick to OKC and dropping down to 16 was something like 50%, 51%. So it was very nerve-wracking. It was very nerve-wracking. But when the dust settled, the Detroit Pistons get the number 1 overall pick. Ben Wallace was there. The Houston Rockets are picking number 2, man. We're getting a top 2, a top 3 pick here in the NBA draft. Cleveland 3, Toronto 4. Orlando has 2 top 10 picks this year. They're at 5. Oklahoma City gets 6. Golden State gets 7 from Minnesota. Orlando at number 8, their second pick from Chicago. You kind of feel bad for the Bulls there, man. You kind of feel bad for them because they needed that. They needed it bad, and this is not going to
real, man. For real.
So Orlando's at 8. Sacramento's at 9. And what I found hilarious was the president of the team, the New Orleans Pelicans. She did not look happy when they announced that top 10 pick. When it was at 10, she looked pissed off. And I think whoever it was on ESPN had their mic on, and I don't know if it was Jay Williams or Jalen. Whoever it was laughing their ass off the whole time. When you could just tell she was annoyed because, man, Zion's it sounded like it's not going to be a forever thing in New Orleans for Zion because they're not going to be able to build around him unless they get very lucky here. So I'm sure she was hoping to get a really high pick there, and just didn't happen for them. So yeah, those are the top 10. Realistically, we've talked about this before. Probably one of the deeper top of the drafts in a long time, man. Top 5. Yeah. There's 5 players at the top of this draft that every scout is saying are legitimately NBA foundation builders. You have the consensus at number 1, which is Cade Cunningham. Then it gets a little sticky here where you go next. It could be Jalen Green. It could be Jalen Suggs. It could be Evan Mobley. And the guy that kind of slipped all down to the bottom of this 5 that I wonder why. Maybe it was just people weren't impressed when he was in the G League. Jonathan Kuminga. Those are your top 5 guys. And then from there you have Scotty Boras, a couple other guys that could be really good picks for the top 10. But man, what are your thoughts thinking about? I'm happy the Rockets get a top 2 pick here because they could build their future. And there's other things that are percolating that could happen with this pick. They could potentially ship it off, but does it feel good to finally see a top pick for the Rockets? For you?
I'm perfectly fine with it because we get a chance to see Raphael Stone, and really get a chance to see how he's gonna make his imprint on his team, on this team,
sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I've been pretty impressed with some of the moves that he's made so far.
Yeah.
We kind of knew that this was going to be a throwaway season.
Yeah.
Because you're breaking in new management, you're breaking in a new coach with Silas, and then of course with all the James Harden drama. We knew from the opening tip of the first game that this was probably going to be a throwaway season. So for Rockets fans, we weren't really jacked up to, we're going to try to make a playoff run. No. Most realistic fans were like, okay, let's try to rebuild and get this thing back on track the way it needs to be, right? And so with me, I was with you on this, man. Freaking run the table in reverse. You've heard me say this numerous times. Yeah. Run the table in reverse if you can. Yeah. Because I definitely want them to get a high draft pick that they can build around, a player that they can build around, a franchise, a franchise player, right?
Sure.
And so that was my whole thing. And so the fact that they are getting a number 2 pick, they have some pretty good leverage if they want to, And to be honest with you, I'm hoping that they don't do this, but if they do, at least they have the leverage. If they try to want to go out and get a superstar, you got the number 2 draft pick and some other picks that you can throw in.
Sure.
Throw in a hat to get a superstar. But me personally, I'm kind of superstar fatigued right now.
Okay.
Just with Daryl Morey's style of acquisitions, to where he was always trying to get assets to get a superstar, and we never was able to develop players. We didn't, we really didn't do anything in the draft these last 10 years. And so I'm looking forward to, Raphael Stone, drafting, whether it's, Suggs, Green, or Mobley. I'm kind of leaning towards Mobley.
Okay.
Due to the simple fact that if you can, have a real good, rim defender, You know, that way you can slide Christian Wood back to the 4. He doesn't have to play 5. You can slide him back to the 4 to where he can be a little bit more free. But yeah, you bring in Mobley. I mean, geez, average 19 points a game and 10 rebounds. I mean, he's a double machine, right?
Yeah.
And so put him at the 5, put Christian Wood at 4, and man, God dog, that's your front court right there, man. And so and you can build around those two guys. You can build around them.
Are we just going to overlook that it's going to be Cade Cunningham as the number 1 pick going to Detroit? Like, is that done? Is it a done deal for you?
I think that's a done deal, man. That's a done deal. Detroit,
because they have a ton of guards.
If they didn't draft Cunningham.
I know, but they drafted Killian Hayes last year. They have Bay over there, Josh Jackson. They have a bunch of young guys, right? So you have to say to yourself, because Cade Cunningham's a point guard, Killian Hayes is a point guard, right? Are you going to try to squeeze Cade Cunningham into a different position, like at the 2 or as a wing, or are you okay? Or do you just say, look, we weren't impressed by what we saw from Killian this year. He didn't show any development throughout the season, so we're just going to go with Cade. Okay, well, that's fair. I've heard a few people say that they're a team that's enticed by Jalen Green's scoring ability, and so that's the guy of the top 5 guys. It sounds like Jalen Green is the guy that could be the next kind of like Harden type of guy, where he's all about scoring in volume, right? Whereas Jalen Suggs is more of I liken him to Gary Payton. A lot of people don't know that, but to me, watching him, he plays tenacious defense. He's athletic. He can run around. He can shoot the ball. I liken him to Gary Payton. That's the game watching him play. That's who I'm reminded of when I watch Jalen Suggs.
He kind of reminds me of Chris Paul, though, in some aspects.
Much bigger. He's 6'4", man. So
he's much bigger, but as far as court vision, as far as just being that floor general. He reminds me a lot of Chris Paul, but no, I think Gary Payton's a better analogy, a better comparison.
Because Gary
just
Payton,
from a defensive point,
Well, Gary Payton was 6'5", so you to me, like I as a kid, I never realized how tall Gary Payton was, and then you buy those basketball cards, those upper deck those Topps basketball cards. On the back, I turn it over, he's like 6'5". I'm like, man, I didn't realize he does, because in his pictures and when you watch him play, he doesn't look like a taller point guard. And I get it, like, but for the NBA average, 6'5" is pretty big for a point guard. It's very big. Magic was 6'10", Ben Simmons is 6'10". That does happen. Cade Cunningham's 6'8", so that's you're gonna see really tall guys that don't really fit on the wing or something play the point from time to time because that's their natural position. Okay, that's fine. But on average, you see guys somewhere between under sub 6 foot all the way to about 6'2" or 6'3" is where you kind of see the norm. So with Jalen Suggs being 6'4", and Gary Payton being 6'5", like he was a taller guy, but he was also a very tenacious defender. And to me, that was like, hey, I like that. And he was a guy that could lead the point and run the offense, but he doesn't dominate the ball. Like, he doesn't need the ball to dominate. That's what I see. The very little tape I've seen of Suggs, okay? And for me, Cade Cunningham makes sense to the Pistons because he's a dynamic player. He's a point guard that's tall. He can shoot. He can score. He can play defense. He can play from, he could technically play, all 5 positions if he really, really wanted to, because of his size, right? But you really can't pass up a guy like that because he could really build your franchise. If he just becomes a 20 points a game scorer in the NBA and he's a two-way player, then hell yeah, he's a dynamic guy because of his because of his profile. Physically, he's a bigger guy. Mobley, man, I'm gonna be honest with you. The more I watch the tape of him through his freshman year at USC and some of his high school stuff, there's 2 players that I liken him to. Hear me out. Because people say he's very athletic, he's a good defender, and he has the potential to be a good shooter. Reminds me of 2 players coming into the NBA, and I was too little. We were both very little. Actually, I don't even think we were born yet when he came into the league. But we got to see him at his apex in Houston, and that's Ralph Sampson, and the other guy is Kevin Garnett. Those are the 2 guys that he reminds me of. So with Garnett was just a wily guy with his long, wiry athleticism. Same thing with Ralph Sampson, 7-footer that was wiry,
Yeah.
My problem I see is here's the positive about Mobley. At the apex, the top of the shot, He knows how to find that apex and block the ball. Every time I see a block from him, it doesn't matter where he's at in terms of where he's at on the post or in relation to the shooter, but when the ball hits the apex, he knows how to get there fast in the air, right? I like that a lot. Downside of him as a defender, he's very lean and very slender, and he's very weak because I watch him against legitimate post players like 6'10" guys that are 20 or 30 pounds heavier, and he gets pushed around easily. Yeah. Now, is that a youth thing, a size thing, or what? Because he's 7 feet. He's legit 7 feet. He's 215 pounds. Rod, I weigh 20 pounds more than this guy. And I'm 5'10". Like, that just shows you, like, the guy's a foot taller than me, and that's how slender he is, right? If he comes in, he's going to have to gain a lot of weight. People were saying, well, Joel Embiid, he gained a lot of weight. Yeah, but when Joel Embiid came in as a rookie, he was 240 pounds. He's not quite 7 feet. He's 240. This guy is like 30 pounds lighter than him. You're talking about for him to get to 280 where Joel Embiid is. That's like 50, 60 pounds of legitimate mass to gain. And I don't think his body doesn't look like it's built that way. He may be able to gain like 20 pounds of muscle. That's the same thing we said of Clint Capella when he came to the Rockets. He's very lean. He's got to gain weight. And it took him a long time. It took him like 4 seasons to really gain that mass because he wasn't gaining it as fast as they were hoping for. So I think that's the thing with me. With big guys, I'm a little hesitant. People are comparing him to Anthony Davis. I think Anthony was a much better pure shooter. Like when I watched the film for both of those guys in college, he has a much better touch. Mobley doesn't have a good touch. His touch is very raw and very hard. Like it's a very hard shot, and he does have the ability to shoot the three or shoot from long range, but it's just not a good touch. And so with a big like that does worry me. And of course, you worry about the other things, the size. Can he handle the pounding of the NBA as little as his frame is right now? I'm not saying he's going to be a bust rot. I'm not saying that. And you're right. If he was drafted by the Rockets, you put him at the 5 and you move Wood because Wood is realistically a stretch 4 playing a 5 because he's 7 feet.
Easy.
Easy. He should be the stretch 4 if it is Mobley. And I think they would be fine. But I am very nervous about Mobley. And for me, you have Kevin Porter Jr., who, if you're going to build a future with Kevin Porter Jr., the guy is obviously your next Harden. He likes to run ISO ball a lot. Problem with Kevin Porter Jr., he's not a good shooter. Like at this point in time, he's inconsistent. He's inconsistent with his shots. I've watched him a lot. I watched a lot of a lot of G League. Then I watched him on the Rockets. I like the guy a lot, and I think he's an absolute steal for a second round pick. The guy, he could be a 20-point a game shooter, but is he something you build off of? I don't know, man. For me, though, if you want to give it another year because he's only 20 years old, you draft Jalen Suggs because Suggs can help you run the offense. He can score points, but he can play off the ball as well. So if Kevin Porter Jr. wants to have stretches of running his ISO ball where it's, trying to drive to the basket or, get other players involved, Suggs doesn't have to dominate the offense. Like that's the one thing I liked about Suggs when I watched him on tape. And he's a good defender, which is, it's really hard to, it's crazy to think that we have at least 2, maybe even 3 guards at the top of this draft that are both offensively good, but also good defenders. Like that's, it's kind of a dying craft that we see these two-way players, and to see like we have a few of them at the top of the draft. It's very happy for me to see this. I'm very happy to see this. So I'm thinking Jalen Suggs at 2. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. But you bring up Jalen Green, and I haven't. I'll be honest, I haven't seen too much tape on Green just yet. But I am probably right after we do this episode.
Okay.
But based on what I've seen, just a little that I've seen so far, I mean, Green is. Green could be the X factor in as far as top 5, as far as your top 5, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because there's not too many people that can create their own shots. I mean, just off the rip, right? And so the fact that that he's a natural 2 guard.
Yeah.
That makes things extremely intriguing as well too, because for the Rockets. I mean, who do we have playing? Who did we have this year playing too? I don't even know.
It was Kevin Porter Jr. when the season
This
wrapped
Kevin
up.
Porter Jr. Yeah,
When the season
So
went on, but he was the guy.
yeah, so I mean, for some odd reason, I thought he played point, but okay.
No, he's a two guard, but watching him on tape, he's 6'4". But when you watch Porter Jr., he doesn't look 6'4". He looks like he's like 6'6". I'm not gonna lie, and maybe the fro makes him look a little taller as well, and he's a little leaner.
Oh,
but his build is he looks taller based off of his build, right? And when he dribbles the ball, he reminds me a lot of a young Harden, and before Harden got fat. Let's be real. He's very strong to the basket. He's very fast to the basket. The one thing I liked about Kevin Porter Jr., different than Harden, even when he first jumped into the league, Harden can get to the basket easily because of his size, but he was never a dedicated finisher. Like, he wasn't a monster to the rack. He would just drive and look for the foul, right, from the beginning. Porter Jr., like, he looks like a guy, like, he's determined to get the ball in the basket, not looking for the foul. That was in the G League, and that was definitely in the NBA, like, watching him play. The problem is when he's on the perimeter, he was a liability for large stretches. There were games there where he made 2 or 3 shots, 2 or 3 threes, looking good. But, at the end of the game, he was 3 of 12 from the behind the arc, something crazy like that. And he was consistently not very good. And so that worries me a little bit. But, man, if you really let's say the Rockets really like Jalen Green. And from the tape I've seen of Jalen Green, I do like his game. This guy is good offensively. He's a natural with the ball. He is a natural 2-guard. If I have to compare him to somebody in terms of, like, I'm not going to see greatness, guys. I'm talking about how his offensive game is crafted at this point going into the NBA. Kobe Bryant.
Yeah.
A lot like Kobe Bryant. A slasher that can shoot, that has a really good mid-range, and this guy has a good mid-range jumper. He creates his own shot. He gets it to the basket, and he finishes solidly. He knows how to finish. So, yeah.
Okay.
So, but if the Pistons are going to go, let's go with Jonathan. Let's go with Cade Cunningham, obvious choice for them. Or if they really like Jalen. If they take Jalen Green, then it's going to be chaotic at that point. The top of the draft. After if it's Jalen Green, then it's like, does Houston go Cade, or do they go with the guy that they pegged, as their number 1 guy? If it wasn't Cade Cunningham, like, man, here's the other thing, man. Like you said, they could ship this number 2 pick off, man, and get a superstar. Here's the problem, though. As of today, which is June 27th, 2001, there are only potentially two superstars that may be asking to be traded. One of them is Damian Lillard out of Portland, because it looks like they're going to hire Chauncey Billups as their head coach, and apparently Dame is not a big fan of that. The other guy, a little shocking because he's so young, but apparently that relationship is very scarred there in Dallas. Luka, man. Luka apparently wants out, man, and it's a 22-year-old. Like, for me, man, I'm gonna be real with you. I want somebody a quality franchise builder out of the draft, right? But if I'm gonna make a run at Luka, I have no problem shipping off number 2, man, and several of those other first-round picks.
Yeah. That's. I mean, if you're either talking Luka or Lillard, those are the only two options that you're entertaining. Everything else is trash.
I'm not a big fan. Well, I like Dame's game. He's a hustler, man. Problem is, he's 30 years old. He's got a big contract. You have another guy already on your roster at 30 years old that's going to cost probably top 3 in the NBA this next season, and that's John Wall.
All right.
I threw this out there to you in DMs, man. I'm going to put it out there right now. I want to get your thoughts so people can really kind of soak this in and let it marinate. I'm thinking this. If Luka really wants out of Dallas, that relationship can be repaired. The number 2 pick is a very valuable pick this year because there's so many good guys out there, right? Good guards. You offer the number 2 pick to Dallas along with John Wall to make the contract work. In a signing trade, Luka signs his Supermax extension. You can offer 22 or 23 or 24 as well because they have those 2 picks in this year. Hell, you can offer both of them. So that's 3 picks this year to Dallas with John Wall for Luka. I'm going to be real, man. The more I think about this, there's not much in terms of out there in the NBA that other teams can really offer that could compete with that. I mean,
Right.
Where? Let's go to Miami. Tyler Hero, apparently they're looking to shop him. Tyler Hero, right? And boy, do they regret not taking James. God, can you believe, man, that they didn't want to give James Harden for Tyler Hero. That's the Rockets wanted Duncan Robinson, maybe a pick or two, and Tyler Hero for James Harden, and they said no, we don't want that.
And the Rockets will entertain that all day long, man.
Oh man, it blows my mind. And probably Iguodala probably had to have come in because of contract as part of the deal.
And that would have been all right too. So
well, we both knew that when these trades were going to happen, that contracts were going to have to come back. That's why with the Wall Westbrook deal, it made sense, and I was fine with it at the time because I was like, okay, we're getting a guy that's just a couple years younger. He's coming off injuries, so we don't know how good he is. But at the same time, I knew that we also got a first round pick. The Rockets got a first round pick out of that, So it's funny to me to think about, like, when I think about other teams that can offer. Maybe Oklahoma City has a bunch of picks. Maybe Orlando offers those top 2 picks, the top 2 of those, the 2 that are in the top 10 this year. I don't know, but I don't think he would want to go to Orlando. Luka would want to go to Orlando, but Houston would be a good place for him. It's a good destination because it's not that far from where he's at now. But it's just as equal as a high profile in terms of a franchise. It's not New York. New York doesn't have assets to make a deal. Portland does, but I mean, do they really want to offer everything? Because they're going to have to give up Dame and their future picks, which they're probably going to need once Dame's shipped off, right? To give all that up to get Luka, is it worth it? Is Luka going to want to even play in Portland? It's Portland, Oregon. It's like there's so many things to think about here. But to me, it's like, hey, if there was a team that with assets, with the pick that makes sense, that's a good value, even though they're your rival, I think it's a deal like that to the Rockets with 2 and assets and contract over for Luka. I mean, I don't think anybody could beat that, man. I don't think so.
Yeah, I think it's a win-win situation because just let's admit, the Dallas Mavericks, they're a dumpster fire right now, man. You look all up and down from the front office all the way down to the floor.
Yeah.
It's a dumpster fire right now, and if you look at it from a Maverick standpoint, you get the number 2 pick in the draft that you can, get you a day 1 starter and build around. Whether it's Suggs or Green, but you can get you that immediate replacement for Luka, and go from there, right?
Yeah.
And you've gotten maybe slightly younger, and then plus on top of that, you get more assets and whatnot to where you can build for the future. Yeah, it's a win-win situation, and then with the Rockets, you got a dynamic player that makes you a team that can get back into the playoffs and can build around, right?
Yeah.
And so you put Luka Doncic with Christian Wood and some of the other young talent, and man, that's not bad. That's not a bad squad.
It's not a bad start. I mean, you're more than likely still going to be a lottery team next year, but you think about it. The other thing is Porzingis isn't very happy because he wants more touches in Dallas, right? So if let's say they go Jalen Green, then it's an offensive minded guard. But let's say they go Suggs, well, then at that point, it's not really a big deal because Porzingis is going to get his shots. Suggs is going to find him the ball. It's weird what's going on in Dallas just because a lot of it starts with just a bad culture from their front office. That's been happening. We found this out the last 6 or 7 years what was going on, but apparently the drama has been going on this whole time, and Luke is not very happy. They fired Donnie Nelson, apparently one of these head executives over there who's friends with Cuban. He's not a fan of Luka, and he and Luka have been butting heads, and they're reaching out to Jason Kidd to be the head coach, who apparently, Luka's not a fan of that either. I guess they're thinking that it should help, but then they call Dirk in to kind of save the day. Dirk's over there hanging out,
Right.
playing, MLB The Show at home, and they're like, "Can you come back, man? We need you to help out." What? We're going to make you a special advisor. What am I doing? We want you to do whatever it takes to keep Luka here. We got to keep Luka here. I know Mark Cuban's throwing everything out there, but to me, it's like, if the upper management was a problem for Luka, then Cuban should have addressed that years ago, the last couple of years, and apparently he never cared. Either he didn't care or he's just that stupid, which I find it hard to believe. That man is so involved with this franchise to not know the culture that's taking place with his executives there. That's not a good sign to me. Either way, all that aside, the only other team that could probably offer something would be Colin Sexton from the Cavs, and it's been known that the Rockets and the Cavs are looking to potentially ship out their top 3 picks, 2 and 3. So I'm not a big. I mean, I know he had a good season, man, but I'm not a big. I don't buy into Colin Sexton, and I don't want to see. I definitely don't want to. There have been rumors about him being traded to the Rockets for 2, like they swap picks, and it's like, I don't want Sexton for playing for the Rockets. I don't want that. I don't want another undersized point guard that just shoots the ball a lot, that isolates the ball and doesn't really, create offensively, Oh, but we'll include Kevin Love in a contract. Can we just stop about? I'm really tired of Kevin Love being this stopgap fix hole for so many contract trades. Whenever a big trade comes up, people go, well, we could get Kevin Love's contract. I'm like, come on, guy. There's a reason why he's still in Cleveland. I mean, there's a reason why he's still in Cleveland. The rest of the league really doesn't want him. His better days are behind him. I think about this whole thing with the draft, and it's going to be very interesting. Since you're right down the road from the Magic, I'm sure you're happy to see them get 2 top 10 picks. Just to see, like, it'll be some interesting basketball, right? It'll be something interesting to build on.
Yeah. With Orlando, I mean, I've said this before, man. I mean, going to a Magic game is pretty cool. Just to go to a game. It's a pretty cool atmosphere. And the Magic, I mean, they have decent product. They have okay players. They got players to where they just don't know how to get over the hump. They just need a superstar. They really do need a superstar in that locker room, man. The core that they got right now, it's like I said, it's just okay. They're mediocre, man. I mean, they've been a mediocre team for the last couple of years, and so. Do I root for the Magic? Not really, but being here in Orlando, you get a chance to hear about some of the stories, and then the latest one that's popping up is that Penny Hardaway is getting serious consideration for the head coaching job down here.
I like that idea. I like that idea.
And I like it. I like it too, man. I like it too because you get he's not. I mean, of course, he's coaching at Memphis, hometown kid, and whatnot. So bucket list already pretty much taken care of. That he got a chance to coach at his alma mater, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But then to come back and coach for the first professional team that you've played for, I mean, that's got to be bucket list number 2. So yeah, I think that Penny's salivating over that opportunity, and I think it will. Definitely attract some eyes to come look at in Orlando.
Sure.
Orlando as a city, just overall, it's somewhat underrated. It's somewhat underrated, and so the thing that Orlando needs, they just need some star power. They really do, and I think that Penny Hardaway will be a good catalyst to get some more star power here into the city.
Well, they have a decent roster, just not performing. Mo Bamba's a decent center. Marquez Fultz has a decent game. They're paying a ton of money to Gary Harris, which, okay, whatever. You got to pay somebody, right? But at some point, you have to think who's going to be the next guy, who's going to be the foundation, and maybe they're able to couple those 2 picks together to move up. Maybe they. Maybe they luck out and Kuminga's there at 5, or something happens with trades that one of the other guys falls, like a Jalen Green. Maybe Jalen Green falls. We don't know what Toronto's going to do at 4. They just, it's interesting. Maybe they go point guard with Jalen Suggs, and then Jalen Green falls. Maybe it goes like this. It falls like this. Maybe if nobody trades out, it goes. Cunningham, Mobley, and then Cleveland goes after Kuminga, Toronto goes Suggs, and then one of those 2 would have to be a shocker, And Toronto goes after point guard just because Lowry's getting older here. We got to think about the future. And
Oh,
Oklahoma
yeah.
City's like, Jalen Green's here at 5. Oh, Orlando's like, wait, Magic, we got a score now. Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you look at 8. You could go. You could go with Scotty Barnes, another guy that could be an additional scorer on the roster. There's a possibility that things can fall in Orlando's place, man. But I'm not dismissing it. But it's just this is an interesting draft because there's some really good talent that there's not a lot of like question marks with their prospects. These are like good guys that if they bust their butts in the league, they put on the muscle and spend the time in the gym. These guys, several of these guys can be elite NBA players, right? People are saying this is going to be comparable to like the 1984 draft or something crazy like that.
What?
I don't know, like easy now. Like that was one of the best drafts ever, So what was another draft?
Interesting.
2000,
96.
96 was a good one. What, 2000 or which one was? I think 99. God, I can't. I have to go back and look at my notes because I had notes about this years back where I was just writing down like NBA drafts. I'm looking at these players, which ones were the best drafts. But they're saying this one could be one of the better drafts in NBA history, which I'm cool with. It'd be a new fresh thing, like a new era in the NBA. I'm all for that. But yeah, man, there's just so much to think about when it comes time for the NBA draft here, And we still have two conference rounds to finish up, and then NBA finals. We still have to crown a champ in a couple weeks, man. It still ain't done yet.
Yeah, man. I mean, this year has been very intriguing, very, very intriguing. And, the top 10 prospects coming out of this draft, I mean, they're all legit. Every single one of them, they are legit.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's going to be interesting these next 2 weeks. We crown a champion, and then the draft is right after that. I mean, it's going to be an interesting, next couple of weeks, man. I mean, I'm looking forward to it.
Sure. So let's move over to we were talking about prospects. Let's talk about this happened this week. So on Friday, last weekend, in the middle of the College World Series, NC State had a couple players that had to get put on the bench because they were saying COVID positive test, and so they ended up fielding 13 players on Friday night, losing to Vanderbilt, and then we find out around 2:00 in the morning that the NCAA pulled the plug on NC State. Apparently, at the time, there was a lot of controversy because we were getting mixed information. We were getting tweets from players that were saying kind of one thing, and the NCAA saying another, and the university saying a different story. So, from what I can gather, is that they tested the unvaccinated players, and they came back negative. I'm talking about for NC State. They tested the non-vaccinated players, and they were negative. Then they tested the vaccinated players for the Wolfpack, and several guys came back positive. Now, that was a story that I had heard on Saturday morning. Since then, people are saying that no, that's not the case. There was a mix of vaccinated and unvaccinated players that were positive. Regardless of this whole thing, I think the NCAA just handled it poorly, how they handled the response to this. One, I'm not admonishing or trying to I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not giving NC State a pass. I'm not.
Right.
I'm also not making them the bad guys here. Like it's a very unfortunate thing, but at the same time, like for people to say, well, it's all the NCAA's fault. It's like no, because there are protocols in place. Well, do you really think these guys wanted to break protocol? Well, obviously not. But at the same time, something had to have happened where somebody was exposed to someone that had COVID. If they were being tested like throughout the College World Series before they even got to Omaha, I don't know that process. Like Rod, I don't know if you may know, but I don't know what happened there in terms. And I assume there were a lot of these players that got to Omaha for all of these schools were tested heavily, both vaccinated and unvaccinated players. But we're getting these mixed stories about what happened, and it's not just from players tweeting stuff out that they're pissed off at what happened. We're getting different stories from the NCAA, and we're getting different stories from both Vanderbilt and NC State about what happened on Friday/Saturday. And I'm really frustrated with this because, they're talking about making these, when we go into the fall, having full capacity college stadiums. And this is a very dangerous game because we're talking about that Delta variant out there now, this modified version of COVID that apparently is more contagious than the others. but they don't know if it's as deadly as the original strain or the other strains that are out there. But it is highly contagious. So what we could potentially be talking about is this could be pushing into another uptick in pandemic when college football resumes, because we both know college football. We've been around it our whole life, Rod. There's tailgating, there's partying, there's a sea of people inside a sea of people every Saturday, right?
Yep.
So if they're talking about trying to get close to full capacity come the beginning of the season, it's what it sounds like is the NCAA really doesn't have their story straight and their system straight about how to handle COVID at this point. Because look, I get it. People should have the right to choose to get vaccinated or not vaccinated. I understand that argument, guys. I'm not going to fight that at all because I'm a vaccinated guy. Rod, did you get vaccinated? Okay,
Yep, fully
vaccinated. Mm-hmm. We both have medical issues that make us also very targets for COVID to have really big side effects from COVID. We're both compromised. So for me, it was like what I'm doing is, I'm getting the vaccine, even though it kind of worries me that we've only had it around for a year or whatever of testing. There's not a lot of data, long-term data on the vaccine. But at the same time, I think about it like this. For me, it's twofold. One, I'm looking at my health, yes, of course. More importantly for me, I'm looking at the health of everyone around me. Like what I didn't want to do is become someone that could be potentially infected and expose other people and get people around me infected. So that's why I went that route. Now, my wife and I argued a little bit about it, but she ended up getting vaccinated, where she didn't really want to because she just thought the time wasn't right. And there's more to that story as well. But ultimately, she thought about doing it for me and for everyone around us, which is one aspect of looking at it. I'm okay with folks saying, I'm not ready to get vaccinated, or I'm nervous to, or I don't want to for other reasons. Okay, fine. If it's a logical reason, that makes sense. If you're talking about some stupid political conspiracy theory, talking about fucking magnetizing you, some whatever stupid shit that's out there about, X-Files type crap you're talking about. No, we're not going there, and that's not a good excuse.
That's right.
But for players, because they're around so many different people all at once for events, during school time, all this stuff, the ability to transmit the disease is highly probable. There's a lot of risk there, right? Especially when we're talking about being in Omaha around a lot of people, being around all these squads, around each other. So I don't know what happened there, and I'm sure the NCAA is a lot like MLB. They're going to protect their bottom line, and they're going to do the best they can to cover up what really happened there. Because let's be real, if there's two shit organizations right now that they're on my shit list, it's MLB and it's the NCAA, right?
Yes, sir.
I'm not shocked to see all these stories, to see people pissed off about how NCAA handled it. When people say, oh, well, they ruined these boys' a chance at winning, I'm like, I don't know the full story yet. I need to hear it, but at the same time, it's hard for me to trust anything that comes out of the NCAA because I don't know how they're going to spin it, if they're going to spin anything at all. It sounds like at this point they're just like, guys, it's over. Just look the other way, watch the baseball games that are happening, right? I need to know. I need to know more. I need to know more.
Yeah.
I need to know more. But I think that the NCAA has handled this poorly. The way they communicated things to the teams was poor. The way they communicated what happened to the public was poor. It just was a really bad tone from the NCAA. Just kind of they can take the stance of, we're trying to be the good guys to protect people, but when you really think about it, you hear that, okay, so who did they vaccinate from Vanderbilt? Well, Vanderbilt's saying on Friday that not vaccinate, test. Yeah, when it came down that we had heard about positive tests over at NC State, their side of the locker room, we didn't have to get tested after that, and we haven't been tested after that. Really, why not? Because you guys played that game, on Friday. Should Vanderbilt be tested? No, because the majority of our athletes are vaccinated. So it's but the Wolfpack players that were vaccinated got tested. So it's what are we doing here, NCAA? Why are there so many inconsistent? Every time I hear information from the media about what happened here, it just sounds like the NCAA really just doesn't have their shit together, man. And it's really frustrating for me.
But this is typical, oh man. I mean, just about every single thing that they get their hands on,
Yeah.
I mean, you hear the old adage about fool's gold to where or the Midas touch, I should say.
Yeah.
Where everything that you touch turns to gold, right? Well, for the NCAA, it's the complete opposite. Every single issue that comes up, they find a way. And it's not like stuff is just happening by coincidence or just by stuff just happening. No, this they find, like I said, they find real quick. Just got a notification saying that Chauncey Billups has reached an agreement on a 5-year deal to become the new coach of the Trailblazers. Bam, there it go.
There it goes. All right. So we
Yeah.
should. So while we're recording, we should probably see on Instagram Dame posting some rap lyrics or something. Like, is he gonna pull a Deshaun?
Some cryptic, you know it, man.
All right, man. Let's get the countdown running, guys. Let's do this. Let's see how long it takes to get that cryptic
man. Right.
tweet or Instagram post.
Right. So, okay. But yeah, going back to the NCAA, they find a way to muddy the waters. They don't work to get ahead of stuff. They just don't for whatever reason.
No.
And it goes back to Mark Emmert, man. It goes back to Mark Emmert. Mark Emmert is probably one of the most passive aggressive people that I have ever seen.
Yeah.
In leadership.
Okay.
I mean, he's not good for college athletics. He's just not, man. But yeah. But NC State, as much of a great story they were, and I listened to the Vandy game on Friday. We
Yeah.
were actually on our way. Me and my family were on our way to celebrate my daughter's 16th birthday. We were celebrating on Friday, but her actual birthday was that Tuesday. And I listened to the game, and I listened to like that ninth inning to where NC State only fielded 13 players, and they came this close
Yeah.
to knocking out Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
They came that close to knocking out, really, in essence, the defending national champs, right? And so, as great of a story that is, NC State has to take some blame in this as well, too, because once again, you put yourself in this situation, by not being, for whatever reason, not being cautious, not being, just being able to foresee uh, things to come or whatever, and not creating that bubble,
Yeah.
not creating that bubble to where, none of your players are getting exposed to anything, because you're going for a national championship. I mean, the self-control and the discipline has to be there. And really, in essence, the teams that win championships, doesn't matter what level you're at, the two things that they have is discipline and self-control. And if you don't have those two qualities, it's game over.
Yeah.
And so yeah, NC State, yeah, you were to blame for this as well too, but we're not giving the NCAA a pass because once again, they find a way to muddy the waters for whatever reason.
Yeah, at this point though, for me, there's a track record in just this year alone of Mark Emmert and the NCAA screwing the pooch. With NC State, however, for me, I'm not giving the team and the players a pass yet. But at the same time, I don't know what happened there. If there were failed protocols that took place, I don't know. But I think once information comes out, which I'm sure it will in the coming days, we'll find out what could have happened to have led to exposure to COVID, right? Or someone or a player that tested that was a false negative had it this whole time. I don't know, but I mean, if I were NC State, I would be conducting the best investigations I could. That's what I would be doing, right? Mark Emmert does have a bad track record in 2021 because if you remember a few months ago, the NCAA, they looked really bad during March Madness with that whole women's weight room thing. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And like you said, they have a history of not getting ahead of these things, like preventing these things from happening. Who in their right mind did not look at that weight room for the women's and looked at the men's and say, guys, we got Mr. Emmert, we have a bit of a disparity here. Like, to me, it looked like, who cares? Women, they don't lift weights like men do, so we don't need to do that. So let's give them a thigh master and they'll be good with it, right? It's like, what the
Right.
hell are we talking about?
Gosh.
Because when you look at that, it wasn't just it was less weights or fewer racks. It looked like, I'm not kidding, it looked like a couple of stretch bands and a kettlebell or two, and that was it. I was
That's crap,
like,
man.
what are we doing here, guys? And of course, it took one girl posting on social media about this, right? She literally took a picture of it, a video of it, and then went and showed the men's locker room. I mean, the men's weight area. It was like, look, guys, I'm not trying to be a bitch about this, but like, we may not need as much weight or a whole setup like these guys do, but like, how are we supposed to exercise and train, when they have this and we have this, And it took a day or two. Then all of a sudden we find out that they practically shipped out the rocks, Iron Paradise for the ladies, and be like, see, like we made everything equal again. But it shouldn't have come to that, guys.
Or should
The
have.
fuck is wrong with you? It shouldn't have come to that. Like, whoever your PR person should be fucking fired. Like, that should not happen, Rod. It should never happen. Like, look, it angers me because I know from a revenue standpoint, men's sports, college sports brings in much more in revenue. I know this. And not only that, but football, basketball, and baseball, football and basketball bring in so much more revenue to fund the entire athletic program for other men's and women's sports, or, at the university. And I'm okay with that. But this is the kind of crap Rod and I talk about when we crap all over Mark Emmert or we crap all over the NCAA. Like, things like this should not happen. And then when that happens, they fix it after the fact, and it's too little too late, right? Then this happens with NC State and Vanderbilt. You don't want to give the NCAA the benefit of the doubt. Like when people were saying it's the player's fault, it's a team's fault, or it's the NCAA's fault. For me, it's like, I'm not putting strictly blame on one side, but I am definitely not giving a pass at all to the NCAA. I'm not going to do that because they have a history of stupid shit like this. Even in just basketball alone, the way they treated the whole thing, some of these coaches, over the years with their like the Louisville scandal, the prostitute scandal in Louisville, things how they handle these things over the years, just like the NCAA just has a really bad look. And I do liken it to the MLB, and we'll turn there in a sec, Rod, because we have to talk about what's taking place with the MLB. Because we've been quiet about the pitching stuff, and we need to talk about that because it relates to the whole thing as Astros fans, what happened 2 years ago. But for me, this is frustrating because these are things that the NCAA have the money. They have billions of dollars and resources to get ahead of these things and translate things properly. And I feel like it's a lot like Rob Manfred in MLB. They only look after their bottom line until the floodgates open. Then all of a sudden it's like, oops, our bad, we'll fix it, but you got to move on from it. Stop talking bad about us because we fixed it. Like, guys, why are we talking about it? We fixed it already. We gave the girls weights. We've canceled the game. It's like, we're moving on, guys. Why do we have to still talk about it? Because there's so many questions for us as fans to ask, like, what the hell what the NCAA is doing, man? What are they doing?
Right. And like I said, I hate to sound like a broken record, but don't have a choice. They put themselves in this position, man.
Yeah, I know.
They put themselves in this position, dude.
But is it ego? Is it ego that keeps them to doing that? Is it the money? Like, where does this come from to where they think a lot like baseball that their stuff don't stink and that whatever they do is everything they do is better than everyone else, and so like they can disregard the process, the rules, everything. Just like common sense, we can just disregard all of that. And if we screw up along the way, we'll just go, oops, we'll fix it, and all is forgiven.
And that's what it is, Pat. That's what it is, and nobody's taking them to task.
Yeah.
Nobody's taking them to task. I mean, and I know that. We need to move on to another topic, but, one thing that we didn't talk about is the Supreme Court basically, kicking the piss out of the NCAA just here recently when it comes to, name, image, and likeness.
Sure.
And, we'll probably have to, set that aside for a whole new conversation because we can talk all night about that, but it's like, okay, who is taking the NCAA to task? right, on this crap because the NCAA, I mean, of course, they're all about power, and yes, they're all about money.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, who's going to take them to task? Well, finally, the Supreme Court did, right?
Yeah.
And but yeah, like I said, that's a whole nother discussion. But yeah, I will never give the NCAA a pass as long as Mark Emmert is still the guy running stuff, and he just got re-upped for another what 5 years or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, as long as this dude run the show, this is what you're gonna get, and this is what you're going to expect. So, it is what it is, man.
For me, it's frustrating as a logically thinking sports fan, not just an idiot sports fan that supports my team and says whatever they do, good or bad, I support. I'll switch into it. We've talked about this before when we restarted this podcast up. We talked a little bit about the whole Astros scandal with the whole sign stealing thing and how I felt. And just to remind folks that are listening, I was angry when it happened because it angered me because working in the industry, I knew one thing that with baseball. Baseball is a sport that feels that they're above everyone else. Even though they're not the top sport anymore, they still think that
Right.
they're the top sport and that they're above everyone. And what they do, and they say it's a purist sport, so we stick our nose, we turn our nose up to everyone, right? The problem with that is there's a lot of inconsistencies there in terms of like hot takes, stances. Rod, this has happened over the decades with Pete Rose and gambling in the early '80s. He was made a sacrificial lamb. You don't mean to tell me there were other players in Major League Baseball betting on baseball? They may not have. They weren't managing. They weren't betting on the teams they were managing, probably, or even probably not even betting on their own teams. But to think that he was the only one, a rogue person, that's how MLB just done it over the decades. In the '90s when we had the steroid era, right?
Yeah.
We've come to learn that it was rampant around Major League Baseball. The back end of the '90s into the 2000s, there was a guy named Jose Canseco that said, something like 75% of the league is shooting up steroids. I shot up Mark McGwire in the ass in the locker room. I know for a fact because I shot him up in the ass with steroids. And he was labeled a crazy man, right? He was a pariah of sports. Turns out he was fucking right the whole time about it. So much so that we've heard stories from writers that after the fact, because these are writers that knew about what was going on and they let it go. But the moment it became a big story, what's the one thing they did? I'm talking about baseball writers, because baseball writers are a very different breed of sports writers because they are connected. They're interwoven into the mythos that is Major League Baseball. Okay?
And they shouldn't be, man.
They shouldn't be, because they are a lot like umpires and referees in sports. They shouldn't be. You shouldn't see them until there's a call that needs to be made, right? They should be non-existent during the game until a call needs to be made, right? To determine if determine a ruling on the field, right? Well, writers should be covering the sport. They shouldn't be making images about themselves. Like, they shouldn't be creating profiles about who they are because of the sport they cover, about the votes that they get for the Hall of Fame, which is a whole other thing we've talked about in the past. Oh, this guy isn't a first ballot Hall of Famer. Why not? Well, I just don't think he's first ballot. Why not? Because his career was good but not great. Okay, so if it wasn't great, then he's not a Hall of Famer. No, he's a Hall of Famer, just not a first ballot. Well, either you're a Hall of Famer or you're not. That's how I feel.
Right.
That's how I feel. And that's how Rod feels. Either you are or you aren't. So it shouldn't matter. Oh, we have to let that guy sit on the ballot for 7 years before we put him in. At the very end of his candidacy, we're gonna go ahead and vote him in. To me, that's a bunch of crap. I've hated that, right?
BS, man.
But that's how this aristocracy in baseball has always worked, with the owners, with the players, with the writers, and with just all of it. How it all is handled. This whole air of like, I'm better than you, right? We had that with the '80s with cocaine. Select few players you find out are doing drugs, right? They become pariahs on their own as well. The 2000s, when we had the Mitchell Report came out, they sat down in front of Congress, a group of guys. Rafael Palmeiro pointed his finger and said, "I did not do steroids," right? And then they found out he did do steroids, and he basically became blacklisted from the league. Big name players like Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, that whole home run love in the late '90s, the chase for the record, right? For
The
the
single
record,
season.
yeah, for the single season record, home runs. That was a big thing because baseball was several years out of the strike, and they needed something to bring people back, and it did bring people back in
Oh, it
droves.
did.
You know, chicks
did.
dig the long ball. That was the fucking promo of baseball when that happened. Remember?
Oh yeah.
Greg Maddux and
And Tom Glavine,
Tom
man.
Glavine, chicks dig the long ball. That's what they promoted. People want to see the home runs, and they gave it to them, and they didn't care what people were putting in their bodies to do that. Right?
Yeah,
You had guys
yeah,
that never even
yeah.
hit home runs, like double-digit home runs, were hitting 50, like Brady Anderson. Guys like that were hitting tons of home runs. They didn't care. The people that covered it, they knew what was going on. They didn't care. It wasn't until something hit the public forum, that suddenly we have a problem with it. When the Mitchell report came out, what did they do? Oh, we got to go in front of Congress. Writers are just condemning the few players out there that did it. They're calling it cheating when we talked about in the past years about greenies, cocaine, Toradol, like so many other forms of physical advantage in whatever sports they're in, right? The other thing is, if you've been around baseball long enough, you know people that'll be real with you. They'll tell you one thing: sign stealing is a part of the game.
Oh yeah.
Every single player, every single team does what they can to get that advantage. That said, I don't like what the Astros did. I'll say it again. It pissed me off. It angered me. I don't know how you felt, Rod. How did you feel when you heard about that a couple 2 years
Man,
ago?
it was embarrassing as a fan, man.
It was embarrassing, right?
It was very embarrassing because it's like, okay, finally, Houston's back on top of the sports world.
Yeah.
I mean, the city had been craving for a championship, man, since '95.
Yeah.
And we finally got it, sitting on top of the world and whatnot, and finally getting some recognition as a powerhouse in MLB. And it's like, okay, as a fan, it's a great feeling. Now, I will say this, being in this position that they're in now, especially they're back to. I mean, they had a real good season, a very good season last year. Came close to going back to the World Series. They're having an excellent season this year. They're one of the hottest, if not the hottest, team in the league. And once again, 2 years removed from the scandal, they're doing great. So, am I really enjoying this bad boy persona that they finally that the team is starting to embrace? Yeah, I am.
Okay.
I am. But when it first hit, it was very embarrassing. I mean, I would go into work and say, and people get to talking about it and everything because I talk so much trash about the Astros, right? And so it was embarrassing as a fan, and yeah, it did upset me for a little bit, but. Was it enough for me to say, screw the Astros? No.
So-
I'm still a diehard fan, man.
So for me, I knew this was something that always went on with baseball. There was something always going on, like a little bit of in the background. There's something that can be deemed a controversy, right? And I always knew that this was a thing. The digital sign stealing thing, I didn't know about because I had been out of the media about 10 years at this point. The thing is that like I said, Rod. My thing is, if you're going to have a take like this, a hot take, be consistent across the board. What angered me was there was a select few of baseball writers that sees an opportunity to dig in and make the Astros the sacrificial lamb from the media standpoint. Not only that, but MLB, who now we know with this whole spider attack thing, has a history of finding creating sacrificial lambs for the sake of the league, for the sake of their of their franchises, the Dodgers, the Red Sox, the Yankees. This is nothing new when it comes to baseball. Like I said earlier, with the whole cheating in baseball, betting in baseball, you mean to tell me that Pete Rose was the only one? He managed the Reds, right? I guarantee you there was stuff going around the league that they squashed way back then. Bud Selig, when it came to steroids, they knew what was going on and they did their best to. Whoever was in front of the Congress in that Mitchell report, they were loved for years for hitting all those home runs, right? But the moment that thing happened, that whole group became pariahs. That whole group. Did you see Barry Bonds in front of that panel? Nope.
Oh no.
And guess what happened a couple years later? Barry Bonds juiced himself out of his mind, right? He became the freaking Hulk and went out there and broke Roger Maris's record in one season, right?
Yep.
I'm sorry. He broke the home run record and went after 755. Right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I mean, my point is with that is that, you know, had Barry Bonds been in that panel a few years before in front of Congress, would he have been the guy to push forward the next wave of MLB popularity? Probably not. I don't know. But you didn't hear much from Sammy Sosa, from Rafael Palmeiro, from Mark McGwire after that, right? They kind of just fell off the radar, right? MLB is okay with that because people turned to them, made them the sacrificial lamb. That's what MLB does. That's what happened with the Astros, because when that happened 2 years ago, you saw these articles, and at the very bottom, MLB is investigating that potentially half the league was doing digital sign stealing. We find out that in 2017, before the Astros were even investigated in 2019, but in 2017, a letter went out to both the Yankees and the Red Sox that they were doing this. They were doing this exact thing that people were calling the Astros cheaters for, and they were told to stop doing it in 2017, the same year we're talking about when we're talking about the Houston Astros. It's just at the end of it all, the Astros won the World Series, you know, and apparently from what the investigation stated was they were told to stop in 2017. The Astros stopped doing it before they went to the playoffs. So in the playoffs, they played cleanly, right? We don't know that about the Yankees because there's a letter out there that's been sealed in the courts that apparently Rob Manfred, who, by the way, is a lifelong Yankee fan, and the Yankees are doing the best they can to keep the court from unsealing that document because they claim it is information that could be detrimental to the reputation of the New York Yankees. Those are the exact words that were released by the Yankees and MLB for reasonings to have that unsealed. To prevent it from being unsealed. So for me, when I think about this whole thing, you see all these writers talk about this. We're kind of moving on, we're kind of not, because it gives fans fodder. Every time the Astros go play somewhere, their people are booing them. They're saying fuck Altuve, even though it was shown by Rob Manfred even said this, that Altuve never participated in this whole sign stealing thing. As a matter of fact, he refused to do it and told the players that were involved with this, we don't want any involvement with it. Also, let's talk about the fact that the two coaches, one player and the coach that came from the Red Sox and the Yankees, Alex Cora and Carlos Beltran, brought it from their respective previous organizations to this team and taught them how to do this. That was proven. That was also in the report. So once again, we have the Yankees and Red Sox involved in this whole thing. We're overlooking the other thing, that when the Red Sox the next season won the World Series, guess what? They got in trouble because they were doing digital sign stealing with Apple Watches, right? That was that whole thing, right? Okay, but they got a slap on the wrist. They weren't. Their manager and their GM weren't shown the door. They were given a slap on the wrist. But it was proven that those guys did that as well. My point with this whole thing is, guys, if you really dig into all the information that's come out the last 2 years about this whole thing, it wasn't just one team. It was a league-wide problem. But to kind of turn the momentum away from Major League Baseball, as baseball has always done, is put something in front of the media and the general public, make it the sacrificial lamb so that people can hate it and we can move on. Kind of like pay no attention to the man behind the curtain type of thing, right? That happened again this month. The whole spider tack thing came out. You know, Trevor Bauer, who's had his issues with the Astros and other teams in the past. Garrett Cole, who pitched for the Astros, who pitches in New York, by the way. This whole thing, I feel bad for these two guys to a degree, because when this news came out, we come to find out that the majority of pitchers in Major League Baseball are using this substance to help them with their pitching, right? Major League Baseball quietly cracks down on the rest of the league, but if you noticed, the baseball writers began to turn on Trevor Bauer, and they did on Garrett Cole, much like the Astros 2 years ago, much like every other scandal that's ever hit baseball. We take a small portion of the league that, you know, that's in the media facing, and make that the sacrificial lamb. And that's what they were doing with Garrett Cole and with Trevor Bauer, just so the rest of the league can just kind of, all right, guys, knock it off. We're going to go ahead and move forward, but we got to make someone, you know, be the public's bitch in this whole thing, right? Well, Brian Sprader, who is a baseball writer, apologies, he went off on this last week, man, and it was weird because The night before, on this, when was this? I don't remember even the day this went down. What, the 17th, I think.
This was probably about 2 weeks ago. It was
Yeah.
about 2 weeks ago.
Okay. He tweets out on a Tuesday night like, "Hey, I have something I gotta get off my chest. I'm gonna do it." Next day, starts firing off tweets, and apparently he was really frustrated with how the whole spider tack thing was being covered by baseball once again, making people the sacrificial lambs for slaughter, right? While the rest of baseball was told, "Shh, keep quiet, let's move on," right? So he tweets out the Royals were the first team with a full analytics and video department close by their dugout, doing so in 2015, their Series championship year. How they used it, I do not know. Then he tweets out again. The Yankees had cameras in left, center, and right, all pointing to the pitcher's glove rather than the catcher to pick up his grip. Aaron Judge's home runs for 17-18 at home. He batted 312, 40 on base percentage, 725 slugging, or whatever. Road, much worse, 256, 404, 531. Next tweet. Dodgers had an employee who was caught setting up cameras at Minute Maid Park wearing an MLB polo when he should have been wearing a Dodgers polo during the 2017 World Series. Remember, guys, how the Dodgers were saying, "Yeah, guys, we're the victims. We should be given the trophy, by default."
Yep.
No one. This one hurts for me to say, was his next tweet. My favorite player ever, Chase Utley, was the biggest cheater of all time. Next tweet. As insane as it sounds, I've heard this from multiple players. Adrian Beltran had a buddy with binoculars and dead center who would wave a beater or a white beater if he was getting something off speed. In 2017, Beltran's home stats were 362, 440, 586. Away, 271, 333, 45. There's a guy, Eric Kratzy, who said earlier before this whole thing by Spader that the Rockies did have a system in place involving a massage gun and chair and benches, which sounds weird.
It's weird.
There's a lot of electronic dildo jokes you can make, guys. Whatever.
Yeah, I say it sounds like some Vegas stuff right there, bro.
Right. What happens in Colorado stays in Colorado. Except if it's a ball, then it flies way out past the center field. Everything Kratzy said about the Rockies is true. Then his next tweet. The Astros sign stealing method came from Beltran from New York and from Texas. We already knew that because that was in the report that Manfred released to the public, but people forget that. The last thing he tweeted out in regards to this whole thing, the D-backs used humidor balls when pitching and non-humidor balls when batting at home. I do not have a time frame on this, but I'm confident it happened. Now, the thing with Spader is he said that he got this from multiple players, sources in MLB, all this information, right? Of course, as with most dumb fans are supposed to do on social media, they started piling on. Where's the proof? Where's your state your sources? All these things, right? And of course, it sounds like he was bullied because the next morning he stated like, "Oh my God, I regret ever doing this. It's ruined my life." Right? Rod, I want to get your thoughts on this. Do you think there's substance to what he said, or do you think he listened to the wrong people and put out information that he probably shouldn't have?
I responded back to one of his tweets, and I said, "Man, bless you, sir."
Yeah.
Because, and if he gets blackballed, that's going to be a shame.
More than likely, he will. More than likely, he's going to either lose his. I wouldn't be surprised if Manfred or somebody
credentials.
Somebody probably called him and said, "You know what? You fucked up. We're going to pull your credentials. You're no longer going to be able to." Because I think he tweeted out later in that evening when he was responding to people was, I don't have a voting. I don't have Hall of Fame ballot voting. So what does it matter at this point, right?
Yeah. Screw it. Why not? He ain't got nothing to lose, right?
Another fan tweeted back to him was like, "Is this response based off of all the stuff that's going on with Spider Tack?" And he said, "Yes, it is. That's what led me to say this."
Yeah. And based upon that, I'm a huge fan of this guy, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Because it's about time that somebody calls out the hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And call it for what it is. And I just had this weird thought to where if he loses his credentials, it's almost like Star Wars, to where, hey, you strike me down, I'll become even more powerful, right? And so just so if this dude loses his credentials, I guarantee you he will create a podcast. You know what I mean? Because if he does his own thing, he's not bound by any regulations or anything whatsoever. He can be free to say whatever it is that he feels like on his mind, right?
Okay.
And so if he does that, you know, if he happens to lose his credentials, that might be, even to an extent, the best thing that could happen for him, because he will even garner a more of a bigger voice, because the fact that he has AP credentials, he's bound by some type of code or whatever, some type of journalistic code, in which, be that as it may, okay, it is what it is. But yeah, but I'm a huge fan of the guy, and it's about time. It's about time that MLB is called out for all this BS that they've been, spewing out for dang near all of our lives, and probably even going beyond that. There needs to be some serious, you know, I'm not I'm sick and tired of using investigations. It seems like there's been, I mean, the last freaking 5 years, we've always been having to deal with some type of investigation of something, whether it's, investigation of the president, investigation of something else, right? So I have investigation fatigue, but still, there has to be some type of reform in baseball, to where, yeah. All right, I'll say this. I like people like Fernando Tatis Jr.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm a fan of the guy. I'm a fan of the guy. Um, he's breaking down all of these, dumb traditions and just, unwritten rule BS. You know, and what he's doing is exactly what MLB doesn't want. Is that him alone, him by himself can put fans in the seats.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's just, baseball just needs a metamorphosis, just from top to bottom.
You just made a really good point here. MLB doesn't like the fact that it's not MLB putting butts in the seats. It's one guy that isn't a traditionally styled personality, whatever it may be. They want their guys with their their shaved faces, their old
Clean
school
cut.
tucked in things, a big old pack of chew sitting underneath their lip, and filling out a scorecard, like, which is some people like it. To me, it's the most boring ass aspect of watching a game, is having to sit there and score every single event that happens in baseball. But they think that because they're purists, that it's this old classic game, that there's so much pride you should put into it because it's like a historical landmark or something, right? And I've had enough of that as well. And some of these guys in the media that responded to Spader were like, one guy like Darren Rovell, who, he's had his ups and downs with Houston teams, but for the most part, this guy tries to operate with some level of integrity with what he puts online. But he posts, this thread is something from a guy who's on the outside enough but has insider access. It's not who is cheating, it's who gets caught cheating. That's the thing. If you look, he got into arguments, Spader did, with the writers at The Athletic. I can go into a whole other story about the saga with The Athletic and the Astros, because it starts with, believe it or not, it starts with a former assistant GM that did something really stupid with the Astros just before this whole scandal came out, and a former Houston Chronicle, which is the local paper, reporter that he felt got his job revoked. He was fired because of the Houston Astros. So this former writer, who by the way has since been charged and arrested for child human trafficking and being a pedophile. All that you can look up. You could go Google that shit, guys. But apparently, the way the events took place was something happened with him involving being a part of a whole event behind the scenes with a former assistant GM, And this former writer had connections with other people in MLB who were also connected to people at The Athletic, who really were really pissed off with the Astros because for years under the Jim Crane's ownership, they have been more than willing to revoke clubhouse credentials for writers that they deem are pains in the ass to work with, or some that they've dealt are unprofessional, or how they conducted themselves like in the clubhouse. Jim Crane had, as a former player, obviously he has that perspective of he probably doesn't like the media. Now Jim Crane isn't exactly a saint, guys. You can go Google, look his Wikipedia. He's done some pretty stupid things as a businessman in his past. But one thing you have to really think about him as a player, a former baseball player, and he probably doesn't like the media. And it all started with the one that got released to the public was while in Detroit, pitching in Detroit, Justin Verlander had an issue with a media guy over there that had a history of misquoting him and taking his quotes out of context. And he did that again when Verlander first joined Houston. So what did they do? They revoked that guy's access to the Minute Maid clubhouse, and of course that guy goes and cries a foul because oh God, I'm a baseball writer. I should be given the fucking world because I'm a baseball writer. Stupid stuff like that. And I think that's where kind of the axe to grind with the media happened with the Astros. And plus, I'll be honest with you, Rod, and folks listening, I still have some friends in the media, and I will tell you some folks that are connected and not connected too much to Major League Baseball, somewhat connected to Major League Baseball, some connected with both the Houston market and nationally. And I will tell you, yes, that kind of story does have some credence to it, that there was an axe to grind with media people, and that's what started a whole thing that ended up leading into this whole expose. None of it would have happened had Mike Fiers not come out. Okay. And I get that because you have to have a whistleblower. So that's where this Ryan Spader is kind of screwing himself. He doesn't have a whistleblower to go out publicly and speak on his behalf or use as a source to release to the public. He can't print out a blog or a story that says, Aaron Judge for the Yankees is confessing to what happened. Like nothing like that. He doesn't have a player that can go out there on record. So, of course, everyone's saying what he's saying is false. Well, you can't do that if you remember, Rod. We got to be consistent, right? This guy, John Boy Media, whatever.
John Boy.
Okay. This guy was not even. He's not a member of the media. He never was. He was a baseball fan with a blog in New York. He wasn't some verified social media guy. He made his popularity and got his blue check mark from just doctoring videos and putting in these banging noises in MLB videos of the Astros at bats, and that made him popular. Realistically, what he did was help turn the eye of MLB and Manfred over to the Astros, thinking, I got to do something about this, because every time he would release a video, it got tens of thousands of views and likes and commentary. Just the general public were having this whole war of words with what was going on. So Manfred felt like he had to do something and make the Astros the sacrificial lamb, at that point.
All right.
And so, so if you're going to talk about credentials and consistency, whatever you say about Spader, you have to say about all the shit that someone like a John Boy put out there who's not directly connected with baseball, because Spader is a bit more connected, honestly. He has insider access. This guy didn't. But to take everything that John Boy said and state it as fact and put it out there as a fan of as someone that wants to fight anti-Astros, saying they were the only ones. Okay, well, a lot of his stuff, and John Boy said it wasn't. A lot of it was just made up shit for his own gain. He has since stated that. But you got to be consistent, guys. But all of that aside, what I ask is to really think about what MLB does. They take a few people, throw them out there, and let them get chewed up and spit back out from the media and the general public whenever these scandals happen every decade. There's always something each decade with baseball, Rod. You can really think about it when you really think about it. And they have this knack for getting you to deflect your attention away from the league itself to specific people or players or a team, and let them be the victim, as long as it's not your Yankees, your Dodgers, your Red Sox. As long as those big three are not involved, they really don't care. They they can do they'll let anybody else go to roost. And it was interesting because Garrett Cole, who pitches for the Yankees, Trevor Bauer, who pitches for the Dodgers, this is it, guys. This is really it. You have two guys using spider tack, and they're under the microscope now. Well, if you noticed, Major League was quietly, and the Major League and the baseball writers were doing their best to make sure these guys were the bad guys. Just these two. But it was reported, and the league cracked down on everyone else in the league that was pitching with this substance. Yeah, but just go after these guys. Just go after these guys. That way baseball can just conduct business as usual, and you'll forget about the rest of the league doing this. This is how baseball's operated for decades, man. So it's one of those things where whatever happens with Spader, we've known about a lot of this stuff with that. The Astros weren't the only team with digital sign stealing, but as a fan, I hated what they did. It was embarrassing, but I also knew what was going on league-wide. Mm-hmm. This was nothing new, but it made me angry that people were very inconsistent, and it made me angry that baseball writers found an opportunity, latched onto one angle, and really profited off of it financially and career-wise, because they knew it was a story that drew up so much drama for one spun angle. That narrative was being spun and respun, regardless of what the actual facts were that were out there. Let's stop talking about the rest of the league. Let's stop talking about the memo that went out to the Yankees and the Red Sox in 2017. Let's just go back to the Astros, because they're not the Yankees or Dodgers or the Red Sox. So if we can bury these guys into the ground, and it'll be a great story. We'll make them the lamb and to slaughter, and hey, we'll make a lot of money along the way, because it's a story that everybody, like the Michael Vick dogfighting thing, in 07, that thing dominated every single station. I was working in sports at the time. They did their best. Every hour it was like, put a Michael Vick topic out, because it pulls a bank of calls. It pulls in listeners every time, every hour. If we're not talking about Michael Vick here, and it's just at some point you're just like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah,
same thing
man.
here. It's like, for me, it's like, as a sports fan, it angers me, man. It really does, because MLB gets away with it every single time. And Spader was trying to expose it this time, and it looks like they went after him. Someone over there, whether it's from the writer's side, from the media side, or from baseball itself, somebody went after Spader.
It's both. I think it's both, man. And like I said, do what you want with him, but I guarantee you, if he gets his credentials cut or whatever, he is probably going to launch a podcast or something of that nature. And he is, I mean, it's almost like this, not trying to really get off into politics, but what did Donald Trump in was he made the media his, he made the media an enemy, and from that point on, it was game on, and that eventually led to, him not getting reelected at some point. I think that if Spader gets his credentials cut or whatever, you just made yourself an enemy, and Spader's going to dedicate every single ounce of energy to bring MLB down.
Yeah.
Market, and he's going to get a huge following. He's going to get a huge following to where, the stuff that he's going to get put out, the stuff that he's going to put out is going to wing its way back into mainstream media, and MLB's going to have to deal with it. And this time around, you can't do nothing about it. You may have to, they may have to go to court and start issuing gag orders, but then you start talking about First Amendment rights. So MLB, this is a slippery slope, if you ask me. It's a slippery slope. They want to be careful with dealing with this dude, because this dude already has a huge following as it is already, So, it's like, it's one of those deals where it's pick your poison.
Well, for me, it's not as easy, because he's got to have actual players or people connected to MLB to speak on his behalf. It's not going to work. He could go out there and let his nuts hang, Rod, and put all the dirty laundry out there. But MLB can deny the hell out of everything unless somebody speaks up. It was one whistleblower that did the Astros in with this digital sign stealing, and that was Mike Fiers, who, whatever, the guy's a pedophile, but whatever. That people don't want to talk about that. But here's the thing, though. It took a whistleblower, like a player, to speak out, right? And that guy was made a martyr. Like, people made him a hero. Well, if Spader is going to push things out there and let it all out for about MLB, let everything out, he's got to have people speak up. I'm talking about players, former personnel, managers, somebody, like multiple people have to speak out, because if it's one guy, they're going to say that's not enough. I guarantee you, the general public and Major League Baseball and the talking heads that back them up are going to say, nope, it's not enough. It's one player. It's got to be multiple people.
My thing though is, I think that he'll have enough.
Okay.
I think that he will have enough. And this is just sheer speculation on my point.
Yeah.
But I just have a hunch that if all this stuff goes down, you're going to have a lot of folks that are going to be on his side, including current players, that are going to be willing to back this dude. I just have a sneaky suspicion that is going to go down that way.
Well, I think if there was a time to really bring people into his fold to help back him up, now's the time. Especially a lot of pitchers with this whole spider tag thing and how maybe Trevor Bauer, maybe Garrett Cole. I don't know, but like just how MLB responded to that and their approach to the players to kind of just save the big teams and save the legacy of MLB. That's more important to Manfred and MLB, is their legacy as opposed to just the sport itself doing what's right.
And man, it may even be Max Scherzer as well too, man. If you would see,
he looked like he was about to throw down last weekend,
man. I mean, he's getting clearly annoyed by this stuff.
Yeah, he flat out he almost whipped out his dong. Like he was just he was just like pulled his belt off and dropped his pants. I was like, dude, drop a trowel on the field. He was like right on the mound, just like, look, dude, here, do what you gotta do. And I think, maybe a player that's kind of on the back end of his career that's made a lot of money, maybe like, you know what, screw this,
Yeah.
But so many of these guys,
lose, man.
But so many of these guys don't want to have their Hall of Fame legacy tarnished. Like. I don't know. Like, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I do agree that it's going to get interesting with what Spader's doing now. If he decides to push forward, that tweet, the next day, basically saying this ruined my life. It just sounds like to me that MLB really got into it, like did their best to get into his head and put some fear in him. But maybe a few more folks speak out. Maybe a few more folks, former media people connected, but not as so brainwashed by MLB and the sport itself, to speak out about what's going on. I hope so, man, because I really want this. I really want everyone to start putting things out there to understand that this wasn't, especially with what happened in 17, it wasn't one team. So what you were sold was a lie. It wasn't just one team, with all these other scandals over the years. And maybe at the end of this whole thing, Rod, Manfred's shown the door. A lot of this, cleaning up happens with baseball with a new commissioner that has more transparency, and Pete Rose gets put into the Hall of Fame or something. I don't know.
I would love to see that day happen.
To me, there's just every decade there's a scandal with baseball. So to say that MLB is this great pure sport that is it's better than everybody else. Every decade there's a scandal with baseball. Every decade, if you really think about it, and every decade when there is that scandal, MLB does their best to protect their image.
Yeah.
They'll bury people in the process. They have a track record of that. So,
yep.
All right, Rod. So let's wrap this bad boy up. You got a parting shot tonight?
Yes, I do. Yeah, right. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I could be stealing your thunder, or we could go. We can combo this thing, man.
Okay, let's do this.
But shout out to the female fan in France that for whatever reason she wanted to get some shine and hold up a sign that was clearly in the path of all these bicyclists that were racing in the Tour de France, and just create a whole massive collision. Now there's news that came out not too long ago that the Tour de France, or that they're going to go after this woman and sue her.
Yep.
For the shenanigans that she pulled off. But if you would have went back and looked at the video, I mean, this video is meme worthy. It's just absolutely ridiculous, man. I mean, she puts this little cardboard sign out, and all of a sudden just all kinds of havoc just ensued within the next couple of moments, man. It was crazy. So I hope that this lady has, insurance out the wazoo or whatever, but yeah, the Tour de France, when you got a major organization like them coming after you, That doesn't seem to be it's not going to be a happy ending for her, unfortunately.
No.
Yeah, but I just thought that was crazy, man. That was
Yeah.
buck wild. I've never seen anything like it, man.
When you watch
I
the
mean,
video, it's
look,
scary. It's scary.
yeah, look, NASCAR crashes doesn't compare to this, man. You
No,
know?
no. It looks scary because these guys are just hauling ass, and one guy goes down because he hits the sign, and it's a sign that basically is like saying hello to her grandparents in German or whatever it is she's holding up. The problem is that she has it intentionally, has it in the field, like on the road. She has it on the trail, and she's sticking it out there, and she just stood there and left it that way because the camera was on, and she's looking at the camera. And while that's happening, a rider directly in that path of that sign hits it, falls down, and of course it's such a violent crash that nearly like half the field crashed. And thankfully no one was seriously hurt. That's the main thing,
Right.
because they're going so fast. And if you really look, his crash is violent. The guy behind him, his bike literally wraps around in his head and flings over it. Like, you could have easily really seriously hurt somebody, if not even somebody could have died because of that, because these guys are
Yeah.
going fast in such a big congested pile that it was so messy. You're hearing that she's fled the country, that she's on the run. I agree with you, Rod, that I'm all for the tour seeking lawsuit against her. Also, I'm all for the riders that crashed, if they all individually go after her too.
Oh
Look,
yeah,
guys,
man.
since COVID has gotten better or whatever, from a sports aspect, more people are going to the games. We've noticed a real big level of idiocy when it comes to fans in sports. I don't know. Maybe it's because people were locked up for a year. I think it's more than that. I think it's just people are stupid in general and need to get their act together, because they need to act like they've been like they've been there before. Come on. Like, just seeing
Yeah.
all these fights in at NBA games, at Major League Baseball games, at
Yep.
football games that happened this season. Like, seeing all these fights that are just hitting my social media stream every week, from fans. It just, come on, guys, we got to be better than this. Like, if it's a sport you love, stop thinking about the clicks. How about that? Stop doing stuff based off of the clicks. That's really what it was about for her. She's doing it for the clicks. She wants to be on TV or be shown on social media at the Tour de
Get
France.
some shine, man.
Get her
Yep.
shine, get her little rub going on there. And that rub botched. It could have been really bad, Rod, had somebody gotten really hurt, or God forbid someone had died. Like, can you
Yeah,
imagine
man.
that? She's posting a sign up and she kills somebody, like a rider, right? Like, it could have been
Yeah.
just chaos. And it was an ugly scene. It wasn't like it wasn't chaotic, but thankfully no one was hurt majorly. And so man, I think about this and I'm like, we got to, once again, we got to be better. We got to do better, Rod. We got to be better. We got to do better. Like, we got to be better. We got to do better. Come on, guys.
Hey, just keep saying. If we gotta keep saying it till we're blue in the face, Pat.
Right,
Unfortunately,
right.
man.
I'm gonna say it to my dying day, man. I know it. We
That's
got to be
it,
better.
bro.
We got to do better.
That's it.
Thank you guys for listening. Social media at Cap Casualties, slap Cap Casualties / Cap Casualties is where you can always find us. Slap that. Rod, it's been a pleasure, man, as always. I know this one went a little long, but we had some real big stories to cover today. In the next couple of weeks, we'll have an NBA Finals winner. We'll have All-Star ballots finalized in MLB. We'll have the NBA draft. We'll be gearing up for football. So,
Oh yeah.
man, we've got a lot to cover this summer. I'm sure the rest of this summer will fly by pretty quick, man. And then we'll be talking about football in the fall in no time.
Man, hey, bro, and I can't wait, man.
Yes. So, guys, thank you as always for joining. Thank you for listening. Thank you for commenting or taking part. We always appreciate it, guys. And we'll catch you on the flip.
Peace.